It's been almost 2 years since Georgia had an open practice. We don't normally do this, but Dean Legge, Ryan Curley, Ryan, the Bulldogs, number two Bulldogs, practiced today inside. What was it like?
Yeah, it was indoors. They kept us off to the side, close to the wall, not
Yeah.
in there for very long, but did get to watch them run some drills for a few minutes. I focused mainly on watching the wide receiver group. I thought that's where some of the most interesting takeaways came from. I think the most notable thing was that George Pickens was practicing and he was running
Well,
routes.
let's talk about
And
that. Let's just get right
yeah,
into it.
he was wearing a non-contact jersey, so one of the black jerseys like the quarterbacks wear, and he had a brace on his knee. Um, you could tell that he lacked a little bit of his explosion,
Yeah.
but it looks like he's getting healthy. I mean, he made some nice grabs on some throws that weren't great. When I was watching, it was Brock Vandagriff that was throwing the ball to him. Um, but I mean, he was making nice catches and he was running the routes, but you could tell that his side to side wasn't probably what it needs to be at. I don't think any of us really know when he'll be back at 100%.
No, we don't. But see, this is what I suspected. I wasn't going to say expected. We don't know what the future will be with George. But I mean, he. I'm trying to remember Saturday. I don't think when I was watching him and Darnell, I don't think he had a knee brace on that I recall on Saturday, George Pickens. But my suspicion was that he could be at this point in his recovery, rehabilitation, that it would get to people wondering, hey, when is he going to come back rather than if. But I want to, before you say anything more, we don't know. He may, this may not be a season that he plays, but if you're out there running around and it's late September, that means that you've been running around for a little bit, and we'll just see how that develops. Anything, Darnell, what were the? I mean, I guess people are curious about the guys who are coming from injury.
Yeah, Blaylock wasn't practicing. I think that
Right,
was notable,
hamstring.
and
Right.
the hamstring now, not his original knee injury. Kyrus was out there in a contact jersey. Arian Smith was out there in a contact jersey. I noticed Arian Smith didn't um, his speed didn't pop out at me like I thought it should. He wasn't you know, the quarterbacks were maybe overthrowing him a little bit. I don't know if that has anything to do with his injury, but he didn't look as explosive as he normally does. Um, it looked like Stetson definitely is the number two quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
It was JT then Stetson then Carson. Um,
These
and
these that's what practice is for. You don't.
yeah,
I think coming into this moment, it was, or not this moment, but in the recent past, it was Beck that was primarily with the twos and sometimes with the ones. So those two probably have a fight on their hands. Carson specifically has a fight on his hands. What a lot of you know a lot of energy. I mean, could you tell? I mean, we're again now Georgia. The background on this is that in 2019, going into the Florida game, Kirby Smart closed practice, and from that moment forward, the rest of that season they closed practice. Now the end of that year was Florida, like Florida, Texas A&M, Georgia Tech, and there was somebody else in there, maybe Kentucky, and that was a pretty brutal stretch, frankly. And then they played LSU in the SEC championship game that December. No practices were open, which is not crazily abnormal. So from that point until today, the only open practices that have happened were at the Sugar Bowl leading up to the Baylor game in 2019. Obviously, a season ago, there were no open practices, period. I mean, there was no spring practice. Summer practices are not formal practices. And then in the fall, we almost didn't have football, period. And then this year, I can tell everybody, I mean, look, it was looking like we were headed towards sort of a normal time. And then when there was the Delta variant spike just after media days, I mean, you and I are both, Ryan, were down there at media days. And I can tell you from, 2 decades of experience, that is what media days is always like. It was a few, the amount of people were maybe a little bit fewer than in the past, but it looked like everything was coming back to the way that it had been. That was just when the Delta variant spike started. Georgia rolled everything back until today. And I will note that we are almost a month into school at Georgia now too. So, I mean, I
I think we're exactly a month.
okay. Well then,
I want to say I think the first classes were the 20th.
okay. So
So
this was not supposed to be this way, but as you know, and if you want to get conspiratorial, we don't know now. I mean, George Pickens has been banged up. JT Daniels has been banged up. There's been a lot of players that have been banged up, and Georgia just kind of said, "Well, hey, we're not going to open practices." And this was This was the second time their reporters were inside Butts mirror for the Kirby press conferences. Which the suspicion is that everything will be live moving forward. But we'll just see, though. We don't know.
yeah, I mean they could easily change it right back. I mean they're the ones in charge.
It's going to be hard to
Um,
keep flip flopping back and forth, though. I mean, the players are going to class. If this is about COVID, then
and then masks were optional both inside the practice
right,
facility and during the press conferences. So
right,
it wasn't as if there were super strict rules during all
right,
the in-person stuff today.
right. So to say it's all about COVID,
Yeah,
it's not really reality. But what more did you see? I mean, you said JT with the ones, Stetson basically with the twos, and during a practice, typically what we see are fundamentals. You're not going to see scheme. That's never happened. And then the Mark Richt time, we saw stretching. We see, in a way, we see more with Kirby.
yeah. I mean, they were all just in their positional drills, just running through it, and then they kicked us out right after that when
Yeah,
they were getting ready to actually start running plays and everything. So
yeah, that's what it
there,
is.
there wasn't much more than that, but I think it was notable that some of those players coming back from injury were practicing in higher capacities that they obviously were before.
But the George Pickens thing is very
Yeah, that was very, and he
curious.
something. Yeah, he when we first got in there and they were running, the passing routes with the receivers. He wasn't there at first. He appeared out of nowhere, and yeah, he wasn't there for I don't know what was going on, but he all of a sudden he was just in the line. But I mean, he looked like he's getting closer. I mean, obviously he was wearing a non-contact jersey, so he's not going to get hit at all today, and he still has the brace on. But he was moving around quick, probably not as explosive as he could be, but his hands were fine.
George Pickens wants to be a first round NFL draft pick right now. It'd be hard for me to make the argument that he is because I think he needs to play a little bit more. But the only way he's going to play is if he goes through practice. Obviously, in that massive indoor facility, it can get a lot of ambient noise, anything from the defensive side of the ball.
They were there wasn't much to note. It looked pretty
It's
standard
always
to
like
me.
that with the defense. Everybody goes and
Yeah,
watch. Everybody goes and watches the quarterbacks throw to the
I,
receivers. That's what
I
it
I
always
watched
is.
I watched the defense at first for a couple minutes. They were just practicing tackle for loss type of drill with some of the walk-on offensive players, from what I could tell, and then the running backs. They weren't practicing handoffs when we were watching. They were going through just a drill with one of those big medicine balls. So
A lot of noise from
and,
Kirby.
and then I mean, say what?
A lot of noise from Kirby. He's got that microphone a lot of the
Not at
time.
first for like the last 2 minutes that were in there. Then when they were starting to push us out, it's when he started talking.
Yeah, yeah. He's very active. I mean, as head coaches
Yeah.
go.
Dan Lanning was very loud, very animated with the defensive line and the outside linebackers. That I thought that was something to note. But I watched that for a couple minutes, and then I went and focused on the receivers because there just had been so many injuries and everything over there.
Well, it's a position I think, Ryan, that we're still going to see what happens as they move
Yeah,
forward. It's been a musical chairs at the beginning of the season, but we've not seen the full arsenal of this attack. Brock Bowers has been a complete surprise
yeah,
in a good
yeah.
way, and we're just going to see how this thing keeps developing. If you go, this is even pushing it because you're still 6 weeks probably away from Halloween, but if you go on Jacksonville and you got George Pickens playing, I mean, that's a different situation completely to me.
It is, and then the assumption would be that some of the other players would also be back by that point in time. So if it's more of a full arsenal, heading into a game against Florida after Georgia's already gotten through teams like Auburn and Arkansas, I mean they're going to be looking like in a much better shape as far as that position group goes, and they've already shown that they can succeed with people without that much experience with A.D. Mitchell and Brock Bowers.
Yeah, A.D. Mitchell really did have a very good game.
He looked very shifty today. He was noticeably more shifty than the rest of the receivers. I
Conference
think that was something.
Freshman Player of the Week for the
Yeah.
SEC in a league that has some really good freshmen. So I'm not, look, the future is extremely bright for this team. We did just want to let everybody know. Go over to the dogpost.com right now. Ryan's going to have some more detailed notes. We can't explain everything in 10 minutes on here. So go check that out, Ryan. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you on the website.